total confidence in. I think he thought, well, maybe next time I might have a Charleston winning. So from then on, I don't think he ever had sort of complete confidence really in the horses he rode. He enjoyed it, a moment no one expected, just unfolded behind palace doors. Queen Camilla was seen in tears after King Charles made an unbelievable decision by passing the crown to Prince Harry. Emotions ran high, and what happened next left even the closest aides in disbelief. After everything the family has been through, after years of distance and controversy, this sudden handover marks a drastic shift in power. What really led to this turning point? Join us. We unravel this game-changing moment that could reshape the future of the monarchy forever. The shocking royal announcement. News spread through the palace faster than anyone could take in. It started early in the day when a few key royal aides began to gather around the private wing. They didn't speak much, but their movements gave away that something serious had come up. Staff began to move around with more purpose. Some picked up documents. Others rushed in and out of different rooms, carrying out orders they hadn't expected that morning. The mood slowly changed as more people found out what was about to happen. King Charles had spent the night at one of his private residences, away from the usual spotlight. He had asked not to be disturbed, which made the announcement feel more unexpected when it came. Without any sign, without any warning, the king informed his closest advisers that he had made a final decision. He was ready to hand over the crown. The room fell still. His aides looked at one another, unsure how to respond. No one had prepared for this, not at this moment, and certainly not under these conditions. Word made its way up and down the palace halls. Some staff stopped what they were doing. Others stepped aside, unsure whether to believe what they were hearing. As the king's message spread, members of the royal family were called in one by one. The decision wasn't open for debate. There was no formal meeting to discuss it. The king had made up his mind, and that was enough. It didn't matter how surprising or confusing it felt. Everyone had to catch up with what was unfolding. Prince William arrived first. He had been staying nearby and came in quickly, but with no real understanding of what he would walk into. His face showed concern, not anger, but a deep worry. He spoke briefly with a few staff members, then was led to the king's private study. No one could hear what was said inside, but when he stepped out, his face had changed. His expression was very different from when he arrived. He didn't speak to the press waiting outside. He walked straight to his car and drove off without a word. Next came Queen Camilla. She had been out for an event and returned once she was told something urgent had come up. She moved through the palace halls like someone trying to make sense of things. She asked to speak with the king, and after a few minutes the doors opened for her. What happened inside that room would remain private, but what followed left no doubt about how much it had shaken her. After she stepped out, her eyes had changed. Her mood said more than words could. People moved aside for her, but no one knew what to say. The staff picked up on the mood. They moved through their duties with care, trying not to make things harder than they already were. The most surprising part came shortly after. Prince Harry, who hadn't visited the palace in a long time, arrived by car. No press had seen it coming. The gates opened without any formal announcement. His car was waved through and he was taken directly to the king. The moment felt strange for everyone watching. Some of the staff didn't even know what to do. They just stood by and watched events unfold in front of them. Inside the palace, the news continued to spread. Some aides stepped away from their desks to check in with one another. Conversations started and stopped as new information came in. The entire royal household seemed to shift gears all at once. Everyone had to adjust to something that none of them had planned for. Royal officials were told to prepare statements. Security was asked to step up around key areas. Press officers were told not to confirm anything just yet. The king wanted the announcement to come out in his own words. He knew people would talk, but he wanted to stay ahead of it. By the afternoon, the announcement was official. The palace sent out a brief message confirming that King Charles had made the decision to pass on his responsibilities to Prince Harry. The crown would move to the younger son in a decision that was final. The message was short, but it had an impact. News channels broke the story within seconds. Reporters scrambled to put the pieces together. Experts began to speak up, trying to explain what had led to such a decision. People across the country tuned in. Some were shocked, others were confused. Many didn't know what to believe. The royal family had always seemed careful with every move, yet this one felt fast and intentional. The air around the palace felt heavy. People gathered outside, waiting to see who would come out next. Photographers set up their cameras. News anchors began to repeat the story. It was no longer a rumor. It had happened. The king had given the crown to the son who had stepped away years earlier. The royal family had entered a new phase one that no one had seen coming. Everything had changed, and nothing would be the same again. Queen Camilla's reaction. When Queen Camilla was told to return to the palace, she didn't expect anything serious. She had been out at a private lunch, spending time with a few friends. Her schedule was not packed, and she hadn't picked up on anything unusual during the morning. But once her phone rang and the message came through, she felt something shift. She didn't stop to ask too many questions. She got into the car and asked her driver to take her back right away. As the car pulled up to the entrance, she could already tell that something was off. Staff members stood around in small groups. Some of them looked up when they saw her arrive. They didn't rush to greet her, but they didn't move away either. She stepped out and looked around, but no one came forward with answers. She walked in, hoping to figure out what was going on once she reached the private rooms. Her assistant tried to explain things slowly, but even that didn't help much. The news came in pieces. One person told her that King Charles had called for a meeting, and another said Prince William had already been there and left quickly. It wasn't until the third person said that Prince Harry was already inside the palace that she paused, trying to take it all in. Her hands gripped the railing for a moment before she made her way up. When she entered the king's private room, the door closed behind her. What was said inside didn't leave the room, but what came out of it changed everything. She stayed there for a while longer than usual. The staff waited outside, watching the door. Some paced the hall. Everyone knew something big had happened. They could feel it in the air. When the door opened again, she stepped out slowly. Her head was slightly down. Her face didn't hold the usual firm look it often did. Her eyes were red. She had held back for as long as she could inside that room, but the weight of the moment had caught up with her. She didn't break down in front of everyone, but her body language gave her away. She held onto a side table as she walked. Her steps were not as steady as usual. She made her way down the hall, and one of the staff members reached out to guide her. She didn't push him away. Her eyes searched for something. Perhaps a place to sit, or someone to explain why things had turned out this way. Nothing made sense to her at that moment, but, he's somebody who likes partaking rather than watching, right? He likes to be part of his full. Camilla had spent years standing beside King Charles. She had gone through many changes with him, adjusting to the demands of the public and the expectations of the crown. She had taken on duties slowly at first, and then picked up more responsibility over time. She had followed him, supported him, and stood by him through difficult times. Now, without any clear warning, everything seemed to be slipping away. She was told to rest in one of the smaller private rooms. A staff member helped her sit down and brought her some water. She held the glass in both hands, but didn't drink from it. She kept staring ahead, as though her mind had gone far from the present moment. She seemed to drift between confusion and sadness, caught in a space where words no longer helped. 039 to 044. The staff gave her some space, but they stayed nearby in case she needed anything. They didn't know whether to prepare for another public appearance or to give her time to gather herself. Over the next hour, Camilla stayed in the room. She didn't ask for much. She just sat still, going over everything in her mind. She tried to piece things together to figure out how this decision had been made without her knowing. She felt left out of something important. It wasn't just about the crown. It was about trust, about being part of the future she had helped shape. When she finally stood up, she didn't rush. She took her time. She fixed her hair with both hands and took a deep breath. She asked one of the aides to call her car. She just wanted to leave the palace and go somewhere she could think. As she waited, she walked slowly back down the main hall. Every few steps she stopped to look at the portraits on the wall. These were images of past monarchs, kings and queens who had left their marks in different ways. She had walked by them many times before, but now they seemed to look back at her in a different way. She took her time with each one. Meanwhile, outside, the car was waiting. She stepped in without saying much. The door closed behind her. The driver pulled away from the palace, slowly taking her away from the place that had once felt secure. She didn't look back. She sat still, watching the streets go by, her thoughts running ahead of her. Nothing felt certain anymore. Everything had shifted. What had once felt steady had now slipped through her hands. At that point in time, Queen Camilla was not just a royal figure. She was a woman trying to come to terms with something deeply personal. She didn't speak out. She didn't make a show of it. She just stepped away from the center of it all, holding herself together as best as she could. Tensions within the royal family. As news of the king's decision spread inside the palace, the royal family found themselves pulled into something they hadn't seen coming. Some of them tried to keep up with what was happening. Others stepped back to process it alone, but the feeling of tension started to rise between them, slowly at first, then more clearly as the day went on. Prince William, who had arrived earlier than most, was called in quickly and told to come straight to his father's private study. At first he didn't say much. He sat down, listened, and tried to stay focused. But as the king began to explain what he planned to do, William's face gave away what he was holding in. He sat up, looked around the room, and tried to ask for more time, but nothing changed. His father had already made up his mind. William didn't argue loudly, but the air between them grew colder by the minute. When he stepped out of the room, he didn't wait to speak with anyone else. He just walked out and left. Princess Anne heard about it shortly after. She had always taken her roles seriously, often staying away from family drama, but even she couldn't pretend this was just another decision. She made her way to the king's side wing and asked to speak with him. Her voice was steady, but her steps showed she was upset. When she came out of the room, she didn't speak to anyone. She headed back to her quarters, keeping her thoughts to herself. But those who saw her could tell she was not pleased at all. Other members of the royal family began to arrive as word spread. They were not told ahead of time. They picked up bits and pieces from the staff, then tried to piece things together. Some reached out to others, hoping to hear something different, but the same story kept coming back to them. The king had chosen Prince Harry to carry the crown. It wasn't just about titles anymore. It was about changing the order of things. The king had decided something very personal without asking for the family's thoughts. That decision didn't just affect him. It reached into everyone else's future. In the smaller rooms where royals often met for private talks, small groups began to form. Some cousins gathered to check in with one another. A few uncles and aunts walked up and down the hallway, speaking in low tones. The tension didn't come from shouting or open fights. It built up from glances, half-spoken sentences, and long pauses. No one wanted to speak too freely, but they couldn't hold back their feelings either. Conversations started and crashed out. A few tried to bring up neutral topics, but no one truly listened. William, who had expected to take over someday, stayed away from most conversations. He didn't speak with Harry when he arrived. He didn't ask to meet with him either. He stayed in a different part of the palace and asked the staff not to disturb him. His wife, Catherine, stayed close to him, trying to help him stay level, but even she could feel the weight of what had just happened. People began to speak in low voices, asking how this would play out in public. Some worried about the press. Years of careful planning seemed to fall apart in just a few hours. When Prince Harry arrived, he kept his head down. He didn't smile or wave. He followed the guards to the king's study, then went in alone. No one was told what they spoke about, but everyone could guess that the meeting had changed something big. When he came out, he didn't speak to the family members waiting nearby. He walked past them without stopping. That walk made things harder. Some felt he should have reached out. Others stayed quiet, but didn't hide how they felt. The change had already taken root, and nothing felt familiar anymore. That evening the palace halls stayed lit. Every room held a different kind of discomfort. The usual warmth between family members had faded. What was left behind was distance. Even in private, where honesty often came more easily, the family didn't come together. Some sent messages but got no replies. Some waited for someone else to break the ice, but no one did. The king stayed in his quarters. He didn't move around much. He gave no more orders that day. He had made his choice, and now he was giving space for everyone else to deal with it. As night fell, the palace grew still, but the thoughts inside the family's minds didn't slow down. William sat with his wife trying to figure out where things would go from there, and stayed alone reading over old letters. None of them had expected the day to turn out this way. The bond between them had been shaken. Words left unsaid built up. Feelings that had been pushed down for years came to the surface. Everyone had to face what had changed, even if they didn't want to talk about it. The crown had shifted, and so had everything that came with it. Prince Harry's unexpected return. Prince Harry had stayed away from the palace for a long time. He had stepped out of royal duties and moved his life far from the world he once knew. He had built something new with his wife and children, trying to stay out of royal matters. Most people believed he would never come back for anything official, but everything changed the day the call came from the king. It happened without prior notice. A short message came through one of Harry's trusted contacts, asking him to come back as soon as possible. At first, Harry didn't know what to think. He had grown used to handling things from a distance, but this time felt different. He didn't want to ignore the message, so he talked things over with Meghan, then packed up and headed out. He didn't tell many people about his trip. He didn't want it to spread before he even got there. As the plane touched down in London, he kept his head low and avoided the press. His team worked fast to move him through the airport. No one expected him to return that soon. Some of the palace staff didn't even know he was back until his car pulled up at the gates. The guards didn't stop him. They had been told to let him through without delay. As the car drove in, staff looked up from their posts. Some paused, others stepped out of the way. They hadn't seen him in person in a long time. They didn't know what to say, so they just nodded or looked down as he passed. He didn't wave, he didn't smile. He just looked straight ahead and held on to his thoughts. When the car stopped, he stepped out and looked around. The palace hadn't changed much. It all looked just as he remembered, but it felt different now. The air was thick. He took a deep breath and walked up the steps. 2 aides came forward to greet him. They didn't talk much, only told him the king was waiting. He followed them inside. As he walked through the long hallways, memories came back. He had walked those same paths as a boy, then as a young man. So many family moments had played out there, but now he felt like a guest. He tried not to show it, but it sat with him as he moved from one room to the next. Every corner held something from the past, but now he was there for something he didn't fully understand yet. The doors to the king's study opened, and Harry stepped in. The king sat at his desk alone. He looked up and nodded. They didn't hug. They didn't rush to talk. For a few seconds they just looked at each other. Then the king asked Harry to sit down. What followed was a long and serious talk. No one else was in the room. No one knows what was said, word for word. But when Harry stepped out again, the look on his face had changed. He didn't speak to anyone. He moved through the hallway and out into one of the side rooms. The staff kept their distance, giving him space. Some peeked in from a distance, curious but unsure what had just happened. Word began to spread. Prince Harry had come back, and not just to visit. Something bigger was going on. People in the palace started calling one another. Some asked if they had seen him. Others said he had just met with the king. The news reached Prince William quickly. He didn't try to go see Harry. He stayed in his part of the palace. His aides told reporters he had no public comment, but inside he had already started to put things together. Harry, on the other hand, tried to stay away from the noise. He moved into one of the guest rooms and sat down with a few close aides. He didn't speak much. He listened more than anything. They brought him updates and tried to explain what had been going on. At one point, he asked for some time alone. The staff stepped out and left him with his thoughts. He walked around the palace garden later that day. He stayed close to the back where there were fewer people. A few workers saw him but didn't bother him. The press found out before long. News broke that Prince Harry was back in London. Reporters gathered outside the gates. Cameras lined the fences. Some called out for answers, but the palace said nothing. They didn't want the public to hear too much before they were ready. The king had a plan, and no one was allowed to speak ahead of him. Harry stayed in the palace overnight. He didn't go out. He didn't post anything online. He stayed off the radar and waited. Every look and every word at that point was being observed. The king didn't make a second appearance that day, but everyone knew something big had happened. Harry's return wasn't just a visit. It was tied to something official, something permanent. As the palace staff continued to move around, they all began to prepare for what was coming next. Prince Harry didn't try to take charge. He didn't walk around as if he belonged, but he didn't back away either. He was there for something important, and he was willing to face whatever came with it. Reasons behind King Charles's decision. After the meeting with Prince Harry, King Charles stayed alone in his study. He didn't call in any more aides. He didn't step out for dinner. He sat at his desk for a long time, looking down at the papers in front of him. He had made a decision that would shake the royal family. Now he had to think through how to explain it. He didn't make this choice overnight. He had been thinking about it for months. The weight of the crown had grown heavier with each passing week. His health had changed how he looked at things. He didn't want to hold on for too long and watch things fall apart. Charles knew many people expected him to pass the crown to Prince William. That path was always assumed. William had prepared for it. He had stepped up, followed the rules, and stayed close to his role. But Charles had started to see the cracks within the family. He noticed how William struggled under pressure. He watched how the stress showed up in his face, in his voice, and in how he handled things. It wasn't about blame. It was about facing what was true. At the same time, Charles kept thinking about Harry. Even though Harry had stepped out and built a different life, Charles saw something in him that didn't fade away. In the weeks leading up to the decision, Charles started to reach out quietly. He made a few private calls. He kept up with what Harry had been doing even from afar. He read about his charity work, his travels, and how he handled things with care. Despite the distance and past problems, Charles never cut Harry out in his mind. He kept holding on to the hope that things could turn around. Charles spent nights going through old notes, letters, and reports. He spoke with close advisors and asked them to give him honest views. Some of them disagreed with his thoughts, but he didn't shut them out. He listened. Then he sat with those thoughts and let them settle. He went over what the crown really needed. It wasn't just someone who followed the rules. It needed someone who could bring people together again. He saw that in Harry. They talked about how he didn't give up on people and how he tried to fix things even when it hurt. Charles paid attention. He knew choosing Harry would cause problems. He knew the family wouldn't take it well, but he also believed that doing what was easy wouldn't help the crown last. He had seen too many royal mistakes made just to please people or follow tradition. He didn't want to pass down a role filled with pressure and no joy. He wanted to hand it over to someone who could carry it with meaning. So when he met with Harry, he laid everything out. He didn't leave anything out. He explained why he made the choice. He told him what he had seen, what he had felt, and what he believed was needed going forward. It wasn't just about being firstborn or being next in line. It was about rising above the pain and showing that change could happen. Charles also made it clear he wasn't pushing William away. He still saw William as strong and worthy, but he believed Harry could take on a new path for the family, one that reached out instead of closing in. He didn't expect everyone to agree with him. He just hoped they would understand. Charles knew this decision would change how people looked at him. Some might say he turned his back on tradition. Others might think he was too emotional, but he didn't care much about opinions anymore. He had grown past the need to please everyone. What mattered to him now was doing something that would last. He wanted to leave behind a future that could stand strong. He also thought about the people, not just the royals, but the public. He had seen how they reacted over the years. He believed that the country might find healing through someone like Harry. Later that night, Charles wrote down his reasons in a private letter. He didn't plan to release it to the public right away. It was for the family first. He wanted them to read his own words, not just hear rumors. He placed the letter in an envelope and set it aside. He would give it to an aide to deliver the next morning. When he was done, he got up from his desk, walked to the window, and looked out over the palace grounds. The lights had started to go off in the other wings. Staff were settling down. The city outside moved on, unaware of what had just happened inside those walls, but in his heart, Charles felt a kind of peace. He had made a hard choice, but he stood by it. He turned off the lamp, folded the letter one more time, and left it by the door. He didn't say much to the guards outside. He simply walked past them and went to bed. He knew tomorrow would bring questions, maybe even pushback, but he didn't plan to run from it. He would stand by what he believed, no matter what came next. The general response that followed news of the king's choice spread fast. It started inside the palace, then moved out through whispers, short messages, and sudden phone calls. By morning, newspapers had already picked up bits of the story. Headlines popped up, social media lit up with posts. Some people tried to figure out if it was true, while others already believed every word. The news had broken through the gates, and there was no going back. TV stations picked it up straight away. Reporters stood outside the palace, holding microphones and looking for signs of movement. Everyone wanted to get a good shot of Prince Harry or King Charles. Some waited for a word from Prince William, or even a short comment from Queen Camilla, but the palace didn't say anything right away. That silence only made the noise outside stronger. News websites ran with the story. Some focused on the king's health. Others wrote about the shift in royal duties, but most pointed at the choice itself. People argued about why Charles picked Harry instead of William. Articles popped up with titles that asked if the royal family was falling apart. The news moved from one corner of the world to another in just a few hours. Across the country, people gathered around their phones and TVs. Some stood in long lines at coffee shops, talking about it with strangers. Others sat at kitchen tables, flipping through pages of the morning paper. The royal family had always been a part of people's lives. Everyone had an opinion. Some felt proud of the king's decision. Others didn't hold back their shock. Many wondered what this meant for the future. Some said it was about time someone did things differently. Others thought the king had caused trouble inside the family. In some towns, people even gathered at public squares. A few brought flags while others held up signs. It wasn't a protest. It was confusion mixed with emotion. Older people remembered when Harry was just a boy. Younger ones followed his story online for years. They looked up to him even when he left royal life behind. Now he was back, and not just for a visit. He had been brought back in to lead. People started to post side-by-side pictures of William and Harry, comparing how they spoke, how they walked, how they dealt with the public. Every detail got picked apart. The internet didn't slow down. Radio stations brought in experts. Talk shows opened up the phone lines. People called in, speaking from different cities and backgrounds. Hosts tried to keep things steady, but emotions ran high. Some callers spoke with tears in their voices. Others didn't hold back their anger. Online, things moved even faster. Hashtags about Prince Harry began to trend. Clips from his past interviews came back up. Some users dug out old footage of the king and his sons together. Royal commentators were invited on air. They tried to explain the reason behind the change. Some supported the king's view. They said Harry had been through a lot and came back stronger. Others didn't agree. They spoke about duty, order, and tradition. But no one could say the king hadn't thought it through. His choice had come from somewhere deep inside, and now the world had to keep up with it. Meanwhile, the press kept trying to get close to the palace. Some even followed cars, trying to find out where Harry was staying or what William would do next. The palace press team tried to hold things together. They worked late, writing statements, planning what to say and when to say it. They didn't want to add to the confusion, but staying silent also made people push harder for answers. Reporters kept calling. News crews kept showing up. The frenzy wouldn't stop. Even international news stations got involved. In the United States, early morning shows ran special reports. In Europe, the headlines made front pages. Countries across the world watched closely. Everyone had followed Harry's story for years. His return to royal life shocked many. Some saw it as redemption. Others called it strange. But no one could ignore it. Royal fans gathered near the palace gates. Some waited all day, hoping to catch a glimpse of someone inside. A few spoke with reporters, saying they believed Harry could lead. Others stood nearby, shaking their heads. Some wore badges with William's face, showing their support for him. Even among the crowds, people stood on different sides. Public reaction didn't stay polite for long. Debates grew louder. Families argued at dinner tables. Co-workers brought it up at lunch. Teachers heard students whispering about it in class. The choice had reached every part of society. Everyone wanted to weigh in. Meanwhile, the staff at Buckingham Palace started to feel the pressure. Phones rang all day. Emails poured in. Journalists asked for interviews. TV crews requested access. The mood inside the palace had shifted. People walked faster. Meetings ran longer. Everyone tried to get ahead of the next headline. The royal family, meanwhile, stayed silent. No one gave a personal statement. They kept to their own rooms, speaking only when needed. Behind closed doors, they dealt with the news in their own way. The outside world moved fast, but inside, things moved slower. Through it all, the king stayed firm. He didn't try to explain himself to the media. He didn't change his mind. He let the public speak, let the press run with their stories, and let time pass. He had said what he needed to say to his son. Now the rest of the world would have to catch up. A new chapter for the monarchy. Everything had changed since King Charles made his choice. People inside the royal circle had started to get used to the idea, even though it didn't come easy. The king had made it clear. Prince Harry was now stepping into a role no one expected him to take up again. The decision had stirred up strong feelings, but slowly, life had to move on. Inside Buckingham Palace, staff began to draw up new plans. They started to work out where Harry would fit in, who he would work with, and what his public duties would look like. The palace, which had always moved in a certain way, now had to bend a little. Some staff found it hard to keep up. Others stepped in with open minds. However, Prince Harry didn't try to take control. He didn't rush into anything. He sat down with key aides, asked for updates, and listened to advice. He knew how the system worked, even if he had stepped away from it years ago. He picked up where he left off, slowly and with care. He didn't try to show off or stand above others. He focused on doing things step by step. The king didn't look over Harry's shoulder. He stepped back just enough to let him figure things out, but stayed close when needed. He checked in now and then just to make sure Harry wasn't being pushed too fast. Charles had passed on the role, but he still carried the weight of the crown in his heart. He wanted to see it handled well. The first few public outings were planned with care. Harry showed up at a small charity event, spoke to guests, and walked through the crowd with ease. People came up to him, shook his hand, and smiled. He spoke in a clear and warm voice. He didn't read off cards. He spoke from the heart, and people noticed. The reaction wasn't loud or flashy. It came with soft nods, kind words, and real support. The press watched closely. They followed him from place to place, snapping photos and writing stories. Headlines started to shift. At first, they questioned the change, but after a few outings, the tone began to change. Reporters picked up on the way people reacted to Harry. There was something steady about how he handled things. He didn't try to look perfect. He just showed up and got on with it. Back inside the palace, the staff updated portraits, rearranged seating, and changed the order of announcements. The system had always moved with tradition, but now it had to open up to something slightly different. Some of the older staff had trouble adjusting, but most younger aides pushed through the changes with energy. They saw an opportunity to turn a page and breathe fresh air into the place. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla had stepped back. She no longer stood at the center. She watched from behind, showing respect for the decision. She didn't fight it. She simply pulled away and let the new chapter begin without her in the spotlight. Her absence was noticed, but it wasn't questioned. People saw it as part of the shift. Prince William, on the other hand, stayed out of view. He didn't speak publicly. He didn't stand beside his brother, but he didn't stop him either. He stayed in his own space, working on personal projects and family matters. Some believed he needed time to take it all in. Others said he was building something new, separate from the royal path. Either way, he didn't get in the way. The country itself felt split in some ways, but time started to smooth things out. As Harry showed up more, people started to come around. Crowds began to grow. Flags were waved again, not in huge numbers, but with honest support. People didn't forget the past, but they began to focus on the now. They watched how Harry dealt with people, how he listened and helped. Slowly they warmed up to the change. Harry stood in the middle, not as a ruler above, but as someone willing to serve. New plans were drawn up for the coronation. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't loud. It was simple and focused. It wasn't about crowns and jewels. It was about showing a different way to lead. Harry didn't ask for special things. He told the palace team to keep it simple. He wanted the people to feel included. He made room for voices that hadn't been heard before. Schools, hospitals, and charities were invited. Farmers, workers, and students were asked to take part. The event wasn't just royal. It became something for the whole country. The chapter had turned. It didn't erase the pages before it, but it brought in something new. The crown had passed not just from one man to another, but from an old way of doing things to a new one. It didn't come with force. It came with time, thought, and the courage to change course. And so the royal family stepped forward. Not as they once were, but as they were now. Different, but still standing. Changed, but not lost. A new chapter had started. Not with distortion, but with steady steps towards something better. The crown had moved into new hands, but the meaning behind it had shifted too. This was no longer just about duty or bloodlines. It had turned into something deeper about growth, change, and stepping up when the time felt right. Prince Harry didn't rush in to take control. He walked into it slowly with care and purpose. As the world watched, a different kind of leadership began to unfold. The royal family didn't fall apart. It found a new path, and through that change, the monarchy didn't just survive. It found a way to move forward with hope. Do you think Prince Harry has what it takes to lead the monarchy? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.